If you had asked me a year ago, I'd have told you I had the perfect life. I'd built my own business from the ground up, turning a small marketing agency into a national success. Money wasn't an issue, I had a beautiful home, and I was married to the woman I thought was my soulmate. Lauren was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Funny, smart, gorgeous, and full of energy. We met at a charity event years ago, where she dazzled the room with her quick wit and bright smile. I was hooked from the moment we started talking. She supported my ambitions, cheered me on through long work nights, and was the life of every party we attended. We got married 5 years ago in a ceremony that felt like something out of a fairy tale. I genuinely thought I'd hit the jackpot. Life was steady for the first few years. Sure, my work kept me busy, but Lauren had always seemed to understand. She had her hobbies, book clubs, volunteering, hanging out with her friends. We made time for each other when we could, and I assumed that was enough. Then, about a year ago, Lauren announced she was getting into fitness. She'd never been particularly athletic, so it surprised me, but I was excited for her. She started with yoga classes and running, then added weight training and spin classes. It became her new passion overnight. She started waking up early for runs, filling the fridge with kale smoothies, and coming home talking about how empowered she felt. I was proud of her. I wanted to support her, so I offered to pay for personal trainers and fancy gym memberships. She deserved the best, after all. She even joked that I was her biggest cheerleader. And honestly, I liked how motivated she seemed. It gave me the feeling that we were both thriving in our own ways. At first, it felt like a good change for her. She'd come home with that post-workout glow, bragging about her new milestones, like running her first 5K or holding a yoga pose longer than anyone else in her class. We'd sit on the couch afterward, eating dinner together, and she'd show me pictures from her fitness apps or videos of her doing handstands. But as the months went on, things started to shift. She began spending more and more time at the gym. What used to be an hour-long yoga session turned into a 3-hour workout marathon. Sometimes, she'd leave the house in the morning and wouldn't come back until lunchtime. She started skipping meals at home and going out with gym friends instead. At first, I didn't mind. I figured she needed to be social. But after a while, I started to feel like I was getting less and less of her attention. There were other little things too. She started dressing differently. Tighter leggings, crop tops, flashy sneakers that looked straight out of an influencer's wardrobe. Her phone was suddenly buzzing non-stop with messages. And when I'd casually ask who it was, she'd just shrug it off. "Oh, just my fitness group chat," she'd say. I never pressed further. I trusted her. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the warning signs earlier. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. Lauren was happier than ever, and I convinced myself that this new chapter was a good thing for her, and for us. For a while, I just ignored the growing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. After all, why would I question the woman who was supposed to be my partner in everything? At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone says relationships evolve, right? People grow, they change, they develop new interests. I thought that was what was happening with Lauren. She was finding herself, doing something that made her feel alive. But as the weeks turned into months, the little shifts in her behavior started to feel off. Lauren had always been warm and affectionate. Even on my busiest workdays, she'd make an effort to connect, whether it was a quick kiss before bed or her curling up next to me while I worked late on the laptop. But now, it was like she was there physically but somewhere else entirely. I'd get home from work, and instead of greeting me with her usual smile, she'd be distracted, scrolling on her phone, watching fitness influencers on YouTube, or prepping for her next workout. Conversations felt surface level. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give vague answers like, "Oh, just the usual," or "Yoga was great," then shift the topic back to me. It wasn't just the emotional distance either. There were physical changes too. She started sleeping on the far side of the bed, and when I'd reach out to hold her, she'd shift slightly or say she was tired. I told myself she was just exhausted from all the training. But then I noticed the credit card bills. We'd always been open about money, one of the benefits of having a joint account. So when I saw charges for things like extra training sessions, high-end workout gear, and boutique juice bars, I didn't think much of it at first. Lauren loved her new hobby, and I was happy to support her. But one day I noticed a charge for a yoga retreat, something she hadn't mentioned at all. I brought it up casually over dinner. "Hey, I saw the charge for that yoga retreat. When were you planning on going?" She blinked at me like a deer caught in headlights, then quickly recovered. "Oh, it's just something I'm thinking about. I haven't decided yet." Her answer seemed reasonable enough, but her tone? It was defensive, almost as if I'd accused her of something. Another time, I found a charge for a spa appointment. On the same day, she was supposed to be at a spin class. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. "Oh, that was just a treat for myself after the class," she said, smiling like it was no big deal. It was a series of small things, her being secretive about her schedule, the new habit of keeping her phone face down on the table, or the way she'd step out of the room to answer certain calls. At first, I thought I was overreacting. Maybe she was just trying to carve out her own space. But the distance between us kept growing. One night, I tried to surprise her by making dinner, something I hadn't done in a while. I lit some candles, put on soft music, and prepared her favorite meal. When she walked through the door, I greeted her with a big smile, expecting her to be touched by the gesture. Instead, she looked at the table, then at me and said, "Oh, I already ate. The girls and I grabbed smoothies after class." I tried not to let it bother me. "No problem," I said, forcing a smile. "I can just save it for tomorrow." But it did bother me. She didn't even notice the effort I'd put in, let alone acknowledge it. And it wasn't just dinner. This kind of dismissal started happening more often. Still, I convinced myself it was just a phase. Relationships go through ups and downs, right? Maybe she was just focused on herself for a bit, and things would go back to normal soon. But then Michael dropped the bomb. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at my usual spot, Michael's backyard. We'd been best friends since college, and our routine hadn't changed in years. Beers, grilling, and swapping stories about work or life. It was the one place where I could let my guard down and vent without judgment. That day, though, I was more distracted than usual. Michael noticed. "What's up, man? You've been staring at your drink for the last 5 minutes." I sighed and shrugged. "It's Lauren. She's just been different lately. Distant. I don't know. I'm probably just being paranoid." Michael leaned back in his chair, tilting his head. "Different how?" I hesitated, not sure how much to say. "She's just so caught up in this whole fitness thing. I mean, I'm happy for her, but it feels like she's checked out. She's at the gym constantly, and half the time I don't even know where she is. It's like we're roommates instead of a couple." Michael didn't say anything at first. He took a long sip of his beer, then set the bottle down. "Derek, there's something I need to tell you." My stomach tightened. "What?" He glanced around, as if making sure no one could overhear us, then leaned forward. "Look, I wasn't going to say anything, but Lauren's been acting kind of weird. A while back at that barbecue I hosted, she was talking to me, like, really talking to me, and it got flirty." I froze. "Flirty? What do you mean?" Michael hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "She was asking a lot of personal questions. Like, have you ever thought about being with someone other than your wife? Stuff like that. At first, I thought it was just harmless conversation, but then she kept making these little comments, like how I'm in great shape and how you're lucky to have me as a friend." I stared at him, my mind spinning. "Why the hell didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't want to stir the pot if it was nothing," Michael said, raising his hands defensively. "I mean, it didn't go anywhere." I shut it down. But the way she was acting, it didn't sit right with me. And then I noticed how chummy she was with her trainers. I don't know, man. Something's off. I didn't know what to say. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and embarrassment. Lauren had always been social and charming, but flirtatious? That wasn't like her, was it? Michael must have noticed the look on my face because he added, "Look, I'm not saying she's doing anything shady. Maybe it's just a phase, you know? But if you're already feeling like something's up, maybe you should keep an eye on things." "Keep an eye on things?" I repeated, my voice flat. That night, I couldn't stop replaying Michael's words in my head. Was I being naive? Blind? All the little things I'd been ignoring, her secrecy, her defensiveness, the weird charges, suddenly seemed to connect like pieces of a puzzle. I didn't sleep much. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. By the time I left the house that morning, my chest was tight with a mix of nervous energy and dread. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to find or not find, but I couldn't just sit there anymore, pretending nothing was wrong. If something was going on, I needed to know. Lauren had mentioned her running route dozens of times before. She liked the park a few blocks from our house because of the scenic trail and the amazing energy of the people there. I'd never gone with her, running wasn't my thing, but I knew the area well enough to know where she'd probably be. It was still early when I pulled up to the park. The sun had just risen, casting long shadows across the path, and the air had that crisp morning chill. I parked my car a little farther down the road and walked toward the trail, trying to look casual. My heart was pounding so hard I thought the other joggers might hear it. First, I didn't see her. Just a few runners here and there, earbuds in, focused on their pace. I started to feel ridiculous, like I was some kind of paranoid stalker. But just as I was about to turn back, I spotted her. She was at the far end of the park, standing near a bench with her coach. He was tall, fit, and annoyingly good-looking, the kind of guy who looked like he lived in the gym. They were talking, their heads close together, and even from a distance, I could tell their conversation wasn't about running techniques. I moved a little closer, careful to stay out of sight. Lauren was laughing, in a way I hadn't heard in months. She reached out and playfully shoved his shoulder, and he leaned in closer, his hand resting briefly on her arm. That alone would have been bad enough, but then I caught a snippet of their conversation. "I don't think we should keep doing this," the coach said, glancing around nervously. "What if your husband starts to suspect something?" My stomach dropped. Lauren didn't even hesitate. "He won't," she said, her voice so confident it made me sick. "Derek's too busy with work to notice anything. Besides, I've got it all under control." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands clenched into fists, and I had to force myself to stay calm. I wanted to walk right up to them, to call her out in front of everyone, but something stopped me. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I waited until they finished talking and watched as Lauren jogged off down the trail, her coach heading in the opposite direction. I followed her from a distance, making sure she didn't see me. When she finally left the park and started heading home, I got back in my car and drove off before she could spot me. When I got home, she was already in the shower. She came out a few minutes later, her hair wet and her face glowing from the run. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just been flirting with another man in the middle of the park. "How was your morning?" she asked casually, wrapping a towel around herself. I stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Same as usual," I said, but inside, I was anything but calm. That conversation I'd overheard kept replaying in my head, over and over. I had my suspicions before, but now I had proof, or at least enough to know I wasn't crazy. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. After that morning, everything felt different. I couldn't look at Lauren the same way anymore. Every smile, every touch, every casual conversation felt like a performance. I couldn't decide what was worse, the possibility that she was lying to my face or the fact that she was doing it so convincingly. But I couldn't let my emotions take over. If I was going to confront her, I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I started paying closer attention. Started small. I'd casually glance at her phone when it buzzed on the counter, or I'd check the timestamps on her fitness app. I didn't like snooping. I hated it, actually. But the more I looked, the more questions I had. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up with a message from someone named Marcus. "Marcus, can't wait for tomorrow. Same time." I stared at the message for a long time. My first thought was that Marcus must be her running coach. I wasn't sure if this was confirmation of something or just another breadcrumb, but I took a screenshot of the message with my own phone just in case. The next day, I decided to follow her again. She told me she had a yoga session at noon, so I made an excuse about having a late meeting and left the house early. I drove to the yoga studio she always raved about and parked across the street, far enough to stay out of sight. At first, it seemed innocent enough. Lauren walked into the studio carrying her yoga mat and a reusable water bottle. But about an hour later, when the session should have been over, she didn't come out. I waited and waited. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, I saw her emerge from the side door of the studio. She wasn't alone. There he was, another trainer, this one a different guy entirely. He was shorter than Marcus but just as fit, with a smug grin on his face as he handed her a bottle of wine. They stood there laughing like old friends, or more than friends. Lauren even reached out and adjusted the collar of his jacket in a way that felt far too familiar. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the shot. But I got it. She didn't go home after that. Instead, she and the yoga guy walked to a small cafe nearby. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language said it all. The way she leaned in close, the way he touched her hand when he laughed, it made my blood boil. When she finally got home later that afternoon, she acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. "How was yoga?" I asked, doing my best to keep my tone casual. "Great," she said brightly, hanging her mat on the rack. I'm really starting to see progress. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to throw the pictures in her face and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I decided to dig deeper. If she was lying about this, what else was she hiding? I couldn't get the image of Lauren laughing with the yoga instructor out of my head. Every time she came home after working out, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. She'd flash me a smile, talk about how great her session was, and I'd sit there nodding, wondering if she was lying to my face yet again. I needed to know for sure. The following week, Lauren mentioned she had another private yoga session scheduled. I'd already started putting pieces together, tracking her schedule, and paying closer attention to her stories. She told me she'd be at the studio from 11 a.m. to noon. At 10:45, I parked my car a block away and walked to the yoga studio. I wasn't entirely sure what I was planning to do. Confront her? Take more pictures? Or just confirm my suspicions? But I knew I couldn't sit at home pretending everything was fine anymore. The studio had large windows facing the street, and I could see inside from a nearby coffee shop. There were a few people stretching on mats, but no sign of Lauren. I ordered a coffee and sat near the window, pretending to scroll on my phone while keeping an eye on the studio. At exactly 11:05, I saw her. She walked in wearing her usual leggings and a fitted tank top, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder. She was smiling, and behind her was the instructor from last time, the same guy who'd given her the bottle of wine. I decided to move closer. The side of the building had a smaller, less noticeable door that led to a hallway with private practice rooms. I waited until the coast was clear, then slipped inside, staying quiet and out of sight. From what I'd seen earlier, the private yoga sessions were held in the back rooms, so I headed down the hall. I didn't have to go far. Their voices carried. "You're late," she teased, her tone light and playful. "Traffic," he replied, chuckling. "You're lucky I'd make time for you at all." There was a pause, and then Lauren said something I'll never forget. "Well, I think you owe me for making me wait. How about we skip the stretching and go straight to the fun part?" My blood ran cold. I couldn't see them from where I was standing, but I didn't need to. Their voices, and the way they spoke to each other, told me everything I needed to know. My hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, I debated barging in. I wanted to demand answers, to yell, to do something. But instead, I pulled out my phone and quietly stepped closer to the doorway. I angled the camera to capture just enough. A shot of Lauren sitting on the mat, laughing as the instructor leaned toward her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I left before they could notice me, my heart racing as I walked back to my car. I felt sick, angry, betrayed, humiliated. But more than anything, I felt like a fool. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me? When Lauren got home later that day, she was all smiles again. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Yoga was amazing today. I feel so relaxed." I stared at her, barely able to hide the disgust I felt. She was good, I'd give her that. But now I was one step ahead. I lasted 2 days. 2 full days of pretending everything was fine, of sitting across from her at dinner and hearing her talk about her workouts and her progress. Every word out of her mouth felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, I decided it was time. I waited until she got home from her supposed yoga session and was settled in, scrolling through her phone on the couch like nothing was wrong. "Lauren," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, smiling. "Yeah." I stood there for a moment, just staring at her. I wanted to remember this moment, the exact second everything changed. "Can we talk?" Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. What's up?" I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. "I need you to be honest with me. Is there something going on that I should know about?" Her expression didn't change. She tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean? Going on with what?" "With you," I said, leaning forward. "With these workouts, these private sessions. Are you seeing someone else?" For a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Panic, maybe, or guilt. But she quickly recovered, her tone defensive. "What? No. Derek. Where's this coming from?" "I've been paying attention, Lauren," I said, my voice sharp now. "I've seen the way you act, the way you hide your phone, the charges on the credit card. I followed you to the park. I saw you with Marcus." Her jaw dropped slightly, but she still tried to deny it. "Marcus? He's just my coach. You're being ridiculous." "Ridiculous," I snapped. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken, the one of her and Marcus at the park, and the one with the yoga instructor at the studio. I shoved the screen in her direction. "What's this, then? Explain to me why you're laughing with your coach about how I'm too busy to notice anything. Or why you're leaving yoga with a bottle of wine and a guy who's not me." Her face went pale. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. Finally, she sighed and leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. "Fine," she said flatly. "You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Marcus. And yeah, the yoga guy too. Are you happy now?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Even though I'd known, hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this?" She rolled her eyes like it was the dumbest question she'd ever heard. "Oh, come on, Derek. You're always at work. You're obsessed with your business. And I'm just here, alone. What did you expect me to do? Sit around and wait for you to notice me? That's your excuse?" I said, my voice rising. "Because I work hard to give us a good life? To support you? I paid for all of this, Lauren, your gym memberships, your trainers, your damn yoga sessions. I was trying to be supportive, and this is how you repay me." She didn't even flinch. "Well, maybe if you paid as much attention to me as you do to your work, I wouldn't have needed someone else to fill the gap." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. But she wasn't done. "Oh, and by the way," she added, her tone icy, "I even considered going after Michael. At least he has a personality. But he's too much of a coward to take a chance." I stared at her, my hands shaking with anger. "You're unbelievable," I said finally. "I gave you everything, and you just threw it away." She shrugged, as if it didn't matter. "You wanted the truth. Now you have it. So what are you going to do about it?" I stood up, my mind racing. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. "What I'm going to do," I said slowly, "is make sure you don't get to walk away from this unscathed." For the first time that night, she looked genuinely concerned. Lauren crossed her arms and glared at me, her expression a mix of defiance and discomfort. I could tell she wasn't used to being called out. She had always been the one in control, the one who charmed her way out of anything. "Make sure I don't walk away unscathed?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's that supposed to mean? You're going to ruin my life because you couldn't keep up with your own wife?" I stared at her, stunned. "You're really going to spin this like it's my fault?" She rolled her eyes, leaning back into the couch like this was just another argument over something trivial. "It's not about blame, Derek. It's about reality. You're so caught up in your work, in your precious business, that you don't even see me anymore. When's the last time you took me out? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than just another part of your perfect life? I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. Don't even try that. Don't sit there and act like I haven't been there for you. I've supported you in everything. You wanted to get into fitness? I paid for the best trainers, the best studios. You wanted to find a hobby? I gave you the time and space to do it. I've done everything to make you happy, Lauren. Everything. She laughed bitterly. Oh sure. You threw money at the problem. You think paying for all of this means you were actually there for me? Newsflash, Derek. I didn't want a sponsor. I wanted a husband. Her words hit me like a slap, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. And your solution to that was to sleep with 2 of your trainers? To flirt with my best friend? That's your idea of fixing things. I wasn't trying to fix things, she snapped. I was trying to feel like I mattered, like I was wanted. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. And that justifies lying to me? Sneaking around? Making me feel like a fool? She shrugged, her expression hardening. You made yourself a fool. You were too busy to notice what was happening right in front of you. Hell, I wasn't even that subtle about it, Derek. I flirted with Michael right under your nose. I figured if anyone was going to tell you, it'd be him. That's disgusting, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You tried to drag my best friend into this? Why? To humiliate me even more. Because he's interesting, she shot back, her voice rising. Because he's fun, Derek. Do you even remember what fun is? Or has your job sucked that out of you completely? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman sitting across from me didn't feel like the woman I married. She wasn't just unapologetic. She was almost proud of what she'd done. So what now? I asked, my voice quieter but no less firm. You've laid it all out. You've justified it all in your head. What's the endgame here, Lauren? What do you want? She hesitated for the first time, her confidence faltering. I don't know, she admitted. I just wanted to feel alive again. I wanted something. And what about us? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked away, her eyes fixed on the floor. Finally, she sighed. Maybe we're just not right for each other anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I stood up, my mind racing with anger, hurt, and disbelief. You're right, I said, my voice cold. We're not right for each other anymore. And I'm done trying to fix something you've already destroyed. Lauren opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out of the room, leaving her alone on the couch. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She wanted to blow up our life? Fine. But I was going to make sure the fallout hit her, too. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it wasn't chaotic anymore. It was focused. Lauren had made her choices, and now I was going to make mine. I started by calling a divorce attorney. A colleague had mentioned her during a conversation about messy breakups, describing her as a no-nonsense powerhouse who left no stone unturned. That was exactly what I needed. By noon, I was sitting in her office, laying everything out. The photos, the overheard conversations, Lauren's complete lack of remorse. The attorney, a sharp woman named Karen, listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Well, she said, you've certainly got a case. The evidence is clear, and infidelity gives us some leverage. The fact that you funded her lifestyle while she was running around behind your back? That'll play well in court. Her confidence was reassuring, but it didn't make the situation any less painful. I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was dismantling the life I thought we'd built together. Still, I knew it had to be done. Over the next few days, Karen and I put together a game plan. The first step was to separate our finances. I started by freezing the joint credit cards, ensuring Lauren couldn't rack up any more charges on my dime. I opened a new account in my name and had my paycheck redirected there. Then came the hard part, documenting everything. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I combed through bank statements, noting every suspicious charge Lauren had made over the past year. Boutique gym memberships, expensive retreats, extra classes. It all painted a clear picture of how she'd been using my money to fund her double life. I also went through her social media accounts, taking screenshots of posts that didn't add up, photos of her at yoga retreats she never told me about, tagged pictures with friends I'd never met. The photos I'd taken of her with Marcus and the yoga instructor were the centerpiece of my case. They weren't just proof of her infidelity, they were a reminder of why I was doing this. Meanwhile, I started quietly letting people in our circle know what was happening. It wasn't out of spite, at least not entirely. I wanted the truth to be out there, to take control of the narrative before Lauren could twist it into something else. Michael, of course, was the first person I told. When I showed him the photos and told him about the confrontation, he shook his head, his face a mix of anger and disappointment. "I'm sorry, man," he said. "I knew she was being shady, but I didn't think it was this bad. If you need anything at all, you let me know." I appreciated his support, but there was a part of me that still couldn't shake the bitterness. Lauren had tried to pull him into her mess, and while I didn't blame him, it was hard not to feel like our friendship had been tainted by association. Next, I told my family. They'd always loved Lauren, and breaking the news to them was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My mom cried, my dad got quiet, and my sister, who'd never been Lauren's biggest fan, just shook her head and muttered, "I knew something was off about her." As the pieces started falling into place, I could see Lauren beginning to realize that something was up. She'd ask why her card had been declined or why I was spending so much time in my office, but I kept my answers vague. She didn't deserve the truth, not yet. One night, she finally confronted me. "Derek," she said, standing in the doorway of my office. "What's going on? You've been acting so weird lately. Are you planning something?" I looked up from my laptop, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm just busy with work," I said. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push further. Instead, she just sighed and walked away, muttering something under her breath about how we're both so distant these days. Distant. That word echoed in my head long after she left the room. I wanted to laugh at the irony of it. The truth was, I wasn't distant. I was preparing. She'd made her move, and now it was my turn. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. The finances were secure, the evidence was airtight, and the people in my life knew the truth. It was time to end this. I filed for divorce on a Friday. It felt oddly symbolic, closing the week with the end of my marriage. Karen assured me everything was in motion. The paperwork was delivered to Lauren that same afternoon. I wasn't there to see her reaction, I made sure of that. Instead, I stayed at the office late, keeping myself busy with emails and spreadsheets that didn't really matter. When I finally got home, the house was eerily quiet. Lauren was sitting on the couch, the envelope from my attorney lying open on the coffee table. She didn't say anything when I walked in, just looked at me with this mix of anger and disbelief. "So that's it?" she finally said. "You're just giving up?" I dropped my keys on the counter and turned to face her. "Giving up? You gave up the second you decided I wasn't enough for you. Don't put this on me, Lauren." Her eyes narrowed. "You could have talked to me. We could have fixed this." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You mean like how you talked to Marcus and your yoga buddy? Or how you fixed things by sneaking around behind my back?" I shook my head. "No, Lauren. This is the bed you made. Now you get to lie in it." Her anger flared then, the cool indifference she'd been trying to maintain slipping away. "You're such a coward," she spat. "You can't handle the truth, so you're running to a lawyer instead of facing this like an adult." "You want the truth?" I snapped, stepping closer. "Here's the truth. I loved you. I trusted you, and you took that trust and threw it in the trash. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim. You did this, not me." For a moment, she looked like she wanted to argue, But then she just scoffed and stormed upstairs. I stood there for a while, my chest heaving, the weight of everything settling in. The fallout didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, the cracks in Lauren's carefully constructed facade began to show. First, I made sure her social circle knew the truth. Karen had advised me not to post anything online. It could look petty and might hurt my case, but I didn't need social media to spread the word. A few well-placed conversations with mutual friends did the trick. Word spread fast. Lauren's friends, who had always treated her like the golden girl, began to distance themselves. Some were outright angry when they found out about the cheating, especially since it involved people from her fitness community. Then there was Marcus. Apparently, my lawyer's team had reached out to him for a deposition. He must not have liked the idea of being dragged into legal proceedings because, not long after that, he dropped Lauren as a client. The same thing happened with the yoga instructor. They didn't want their names tied to the mess she'd created, and their actions made her look even guiltier. Lauren tried to spin it, of course. She told anyone who'd listen that I was overreacting, that we'd just grown apart and the divorce was mutual. But the people closest to us weren't buying it. The real blow came when her reputation at the gym took a hit. Someone, I'm not sure who, must have mentioned her affairs to the gym owner. Within weeks, Lauren's memberships were revoked. She was no longer welcome at the places she'd spent so much time and money. And then there was the financial fallout. By the time the divorce proceedings began in earnest, I'd already secured my assets. Karen made sure Lauren couldn't touch the bulk of my savings or my business. All those boutique gym memberships, retreats, and private sessions she'd racked up, that was her problem now. I didn't just win the case, I obliterated her. She walked away with almost nothing. No alimony, no claim to my business, and none of the lifestyle she'd grown so accustomed to. I'd given her everything, and now she was left with scraps. The last time I saw her was in the courtroom after the judge finalized the divorce. She looked like a shell of the woman I'd married. Tired, bitter, and defeated. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the victory, it was about closure. For the first time in months, I felt free. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into a new life. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. The weight of Lauren's betrayal, the constant second-guessing, the bitterness that had eaten away at me, it was all finally behind me. But even with the legal battle over, I couldn't just snap my fingers and feel whole again. I'd spent so long trying to hold things together, trying to figure out what went wrong, that I'd lost pieces of myself along the way. Now, I had to figure out who I was without Lauren, without the marriage I thought would last forever. The first step was getting back to basics. I threw myself into my business. Not in the obsessive way that Lauren had accused me of, but with a renewed focus. For months, I'd been distracted, letting things slip through the cracks while my personal life fell apart. Now, I poured my energy into rebuilding what I'd neglected. I started meeting with my team more often, reconnecting with clients, and taking on projects that actually excited me. But it wasn't just about work. For the first time in years, I started thinking about what I wanted. Not what Lauren wanted, not what was good for our relationship. Just me. I booked a trip to Italy. Something I'd always wanted to do but had put off because Lauren wasn't really into Europe. I spent 2 weeks wandering cobblestone streets, eating incredible food, and realizing just how small my world had become during our marriage. When I got back, I decided it was time to focus on my health. Not because I wanted revenge or to prove something, but because I genuinely wanted to feel good again. I hired a trainer. Not the kind of guy Lauren would have flirted with, but someone who pushed me in a way that felt empowering, not intimidating. It wasn't just physical, though. I started seeing a therapist. At first, it felt weird, sitting in a room with a stranger and spilling my guts. But over time, it became one of the best decisions I'd ever made. The therapist helped me unpack everything. The betrayal, the anger, the self-doubt, and taught me how to let it go. Through it all, I started to realize something. Lauren's cheating wasn't about me. Sure, she'd thrown every excuse in the book at me during our confrontation, but deep down, I knew it wasn't my fault. She made her choices, and those choices said more about her than they ever did about me. As the months went by, the wounds started to heal. I found myself smiling more, laughing more, and actually enjoying life again. I reconnected with old friends, went on hikes, joined a book club, things I never would have done before because I was so caught up in keeping Lauren happy. And then there were the dates. At first, I wasn't sure I was ready. Dating after divorce felt like stepping into uncharted territory. But I took it slow, coffee here, dinner there, and before long I realized I didn't have to compare every woman to Lauren. I wasn't looking for the one. Right away, I was just enjoying getting to know people again. One night, after a particularly great date, I found myself sitting in my car, staring out at the city lights, and I had this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Not for Lauren, never for Lauren, but for the lessons her betrayal had taught me. I'd learned how to stand on my own 2 feet again. I'd learned what I wanted in a partner, what I deserved. And most importantly, I'd learned how to put myself first for once. Life wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But it was mine again. It's funny how life has a way of balancing things out. 1 year ago, I felt like my world was collapsing around me. Now, looking back, I see it for what it was, a painful but necessary chapter that forced me to grow. Lauren's life, on the other hand, wasn't going so well. Word of her affairs had spread far beyond our circle of friends. Between her burned bridges in the gym community and the fallout from our divorce, her social and professional life had taken a serious hit. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. Apparently, Marcus moved to another state to avoid any more drama, and her yoga instructor dropped her the moment the court proceedings became public knowledge. Even her friends, the ones she used to post selfies with after brunch, stopped inviting her out. Financially, she was struggling too. Without my income to lean on, Lauren had to scale back her lifestyle drastically. The boutique gyms and personal trainers were gone, replaced by discount fitness apps and DIY workout videos. The woman who used to laugh about cheap wine was now sharing memes about finding good deals on boxed Merlot. Do I feel sorry for her? Not really. Actions have consequences, and Lauren made her choices. But here's the thing. I didn't let her downfall become my focus. For a while, I thought revenge would feel good, and maybe it did briefly, but the more time passed, the more I realized it wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about moving forward. And I did move forward. Work was thriving again, and I even started mentoring younger entrepreneurs, helping them avoid some of the mistakes I'd made when I was starting out. My personal life? That was thriving too. I wasn't rushing into anything serious, but I'd met someone. Someone who felt like the exact opposite of Lauren in all the best ways. She was grounded, kind, and honest. Being with her felt easy, like I didn't have to constantly question what was real. But the biggest change? I was happy with myself. One evening, I sat on my patio, watching the sunset with a glass of wine in hand, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Lauren, not at myself, not at the world. What happened to me was brutal. It broke me in ways I didn't even understand at the time. But it also forced me to rebuild, to look at my life, my choices, and my worth in a way I never had before. In the end, Lauren's betrayal didn't define me. It taught me how to stand up for myself, how to recognize when something isn't working, and how to walk away when it's time. Now, when I think about her, it's not with anger or regret. It's with indifference. She's just someone I used to know. A lesson I had to learn the hard way. Life moves on, and so did I. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more dramatic and intriguing tales, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps bring more exciting content your way. Also, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in this situation? See you in the next story.